This is Tyrese Halliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
Pacer Nation, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode here of your go-to Pacers podcast, Setting the Pace. And boy, oh boy, it was a very busy day for the Indiana Pacers on Wednesday as they agreed to an extension with Andrew Nembhard. And in addition to that, they bring back James Johnson on a 1-year, $3.3 million deal. So here to talk with me about all of that, unfortunately, Facci cannot be with us because he is, out and about celebrating the new job that he got. So Andy Sweeney from 107.5, The Fan, is hopping in. And Andy, this is a good day for Pacer fans.
Sounds like your boy's off the grid. That's what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear on a what night is it, a Wednesday, whatever it is. Well, I tell you, James Johnson, God bless him, man. That's the story of the day.
Yeah.
Your boy over $3 million to sit around and be the enforcer so Tyrese Halliburton and other guys can kind of do whatever they want to do, right? I mean, that's pretty good.
I mean, hey, I'll just say this. I mean, Draymond Green has brought it up like 2 or 3 times. He was like, James Johnson is a difference maker for the Pacers. And I'm sure you saw the story with Tyrese Halliburton today with GQ. And when that guy was talking trash to him before the game, like James Johnson walked over and the dude shut up real quick. So it's good to have the enforcer. And I've heard a lot of people say this, like, why do they just put him on the coaching staff? I think very similarly to what the Miami Heat did with Udonis Haslem. It's just
it's the same
connection
thing, isn't it?
Between the players and the coach, but the players still have trust in him because he is a player where he might be able to tell the coaching staff something, but not everything.
You know, the best thing about today, so, we obviously after the kind of the first day went by, we were wondering, hey, is, something going to happen with the Pacers and Nembhard? And of course, on our show, we're out of Colts camp today, so obviously, it's Colts. And, even yesterday, I want to say we're like, hey, you think we're going to have to end up talking about this or, kind of what do you think the conversation is going to be? And I swear to you, man, the best part of the whole thing that happened today was, didn't it feel like everybody thought that he would play this out and go for the bigger grab next year, right? I mean, that was the thought process. Like, okay, you can ball out in the Olympics and then you can come back. And I mean, unless you think I'm wrong, it seems like he's pretty much penciled in to start the year as a starter. I would see it no other way with the conversations that have happened. Again, maybe you disagree with that. So, you get to start, you get to be next to Tyrese. Obviously, if Halliburton has, a couple weeks, you saw the hamstring injury this year that maybe you're the little bit more of the lead dog like we saw in Boston, and obviously his numbers elevated. So, it's an interesting move because I don't think it was totally expected. We knew the two sides would have a conversation, but it comes together. And listen, if you're a guy that likes Andrew Nembhard, you're a fan out there, they have built for the next couple years this core, mini core, however you want to put it, that this is what you're going to go up against the Knicks and the Bucks and obviously the rest of the Western and Eastern Conference. So it's an interesting move. I'm intrigued. What do you think? What are your main takeaways? Again, he could have got 4 years. He got 3 years. We're not talking about closer to $80 million. We're talking about, about $20 million less. And it kind of fits the timeline that the Pacers have had on some of these deals.
Yeah, I was pretty much in agreement with a lot of people thinking that he's going to play this thing out. But we did talk about it on Sunday as a possibility. And I said the only reason I think he might sign it now is because he's looking at the landscape of the league and how it is harder now to get that guaranteed money with the new CBA and everybody going up against those first and second aprons and trying to avoid that, being a repeater tax team. And I think they looked at it and said, okay, maybe we can find a team out there next offseason that has money. But what if we don't? Are we going to have to do what Isaac Okoro is doing right now with the Cavaliers and they can't even come to an agreement on a deal because I'm sure he wants more money than what they're wanting to give him, but there's nobody else out there to give him any money. So they've got all the leverage. And I think that's a very smart move by his agency to say, you know what, let's go ahead and agree to a 3-year extension. And you talked about it, 3 years versus 4 years. He was eligible for 4 years around 78, 80 million, somewhere around that range. Instead, he does 3 years for 59. I kind of wondered why wait until, why not add on the extra year? But maybe they feel a little bit more comfortable heading into, age 28. Maybe there's more cap space. Maybe the CBA kind of changes in a little bit. So that was my thought process. But I think honestly, it's a win-win for both sides because you get guaranteed money if you're Nembhard after being, which he currently is this season, the lowest paid player on the team, to being one of the top 3 or 4 guys paid and clearly getting starter money moving forward. So I think it's a good deal for both sides, but I was a little bit surprised that it wasn't the full 4 years.
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting things about it. Like and I'll just kind of like throw a couple of these out there that I got thinking of. Like, imagine being him. Like, you're getting ready to play in the Olympics, and like now this is you mentioned. I mean, he was going to make a little over $2 million this year. I mean, while that's a lot of money in NBA terms, we understand what that is in sports, and that's low man on the totem pole. So part of it is he kind of knew he was going to get this life-changing money, but he got it, right? He got it. You could say maybe an off-season early, but I just always think of those things when that kind of happens. I mean, a guy now is making big-time money, and I think there's 2 other things. I think this is like weirdly one of those romantic basketball stories that people would love to believe in. Where was he 31st? That a second round pick, makes it through the NBA, earns a starting job next to an all NBA player, and then goes and makes nearly $20 million a year. I mean, we laugh at that. There is a sense of it was good drafting. I mean, listen, I'm not saying this guy is going to equal making $20 million a year, but the Pacers got Johnny Furphy in the second round. Like, at some point, they're going to either utilize him in some sort of bait for a trade, or he's going to play for them, and I don't think he's like going to be a bum, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, you saw in the summer league that the guy could play a little bit. So, this notion you can't go out there and find value, I think there's a couple instances where the Pacers are showing you that maybe they can. And then I think the other thing for Andrew Nembhard, and here's what I don't know, and this is, I will put it this way. I like the move. I'm maybe not as in love with the move as I wanted to see kind of a full season. I wish I could have seen a full season. And I understand how things play out, value, contracts. I wish we could have seen a full season, perhaps maybe even to the All-Star break, to fully see Halliburton healthy, you would imagine, up next to Andrew Nembhard. So now the conversation is, what is he now? Now that he's got a little bit of money, he, along with many others of this team, everything, and this, man, is built on like improvement, right? Mm-hmm. From within, all these young players getting better. What now with him? Because I very much, until we got past Christmas time, and really until he got this contract for sure, had felt that he could be a backup player, right? And now I don't feel that way. I don't feel like that's the conversation nearly as much. So some of the stuff he does, I know, doesn't show up in the stat sheet. I understand that conversation, but some of it does. I don't think 6-7 points in some games is probably going to be what is expected. But so I'm his natural growth now is what, and I don't know. And for some reason, I'm having trouble figuring that out with him, exactly how good he can be.
Yeah, I mean, I think they saw a lot, especially when Halliburton went out against the Celtics. Like, okay, this dude by himself can do this against that good of a defensive team in the style we're playing. So I think they feel pretty good about that. Now, you talk about him being a backup player, and I agree with that, but I feel like he hasn't really shown what he can do as a guy that comes off the bench versus a guy that starts. We saw last year he was supposed to be the backup to Tyrese Halliburton.
Right.
And I felt like he kind of struggled in that role. And I think McConnell earned that spot because Nembhard struggled. But when they traded Bruce Brown, I think it opened up an opportunity there for Andrew to go back into the starting lineup because they really needed some defense. And that's what he's known for. And the offensive stuff is definitely a bit of a surprise, I think, for everybody, because he came on our podcast about a month ago and said that Coach Jenny Busek pretty much just changed his shot completely. And you can
tell,
it's
unbelievable.
Yeah, he's shooting the ball really well. He's a great playmaker. I mean, I'm sure you saw Shai Gilgeous-Alexander said that if he could.
Yeah, I saw his conversation, yeah.
He was talking about like one of the elite passers in the league. And it's like having that guy next to Tyrese that can really defend and kind of take that pressure off Tyrese as who he has to guard makes a lot of sense. I mean, he's a good fit for the Pacers. And to me, I think the money is really pretty fair because $19 million for a starting guard to me is not that expensive. I know some people were like, well, why did they give him a closer deal to Obi Toppin? It's like, well, he's better than Obi Toppin. I mean, no offense to Obi Toppin, but I think if you're better than Obi Toppin and you're a starter, you should get a little bit more of a pay raise. So overall, that's why I think they did it. He showed that he can fit in really well. And if you look at both seasons that Nembhard's been here with the Pacers, they've been a better team when he starts next to Tyrese. When he's not
No
started,
doubt.
when he's not been in the rotation, it's not been as good. So I think that's just a really good fit. And then lastly, I want to go back to the 3-year contract thing because if I'm not mistaken, you're not eligible to extend somebody on a 2-year extension. Only it has to be 3 years or more. So that is part of the reason why they are unable to extend Miles Turner this year because they signed him to a 2-year deal and did the renegotiation and extension when they had all that cap space back in 21, 22. So since it was only a 2-year extension, they couldn't add an extension on that once his contract runs out. So to me, that might be part of the reason why no player options per Tony East from Locked On Pacers. So that to me is just really interesting, but I do think that's part of the reason why they did the 3-year deal versus 4. Gives them a little bit of room to get out of it in terms of like if Nembhard wants to seek a starting point guard role when he's 28. But I also think it makes him an interesting trade chip as well. Not
Well,
saying
that's
that the
the
Pacers,
other point.
yeah, I don't think the Pacers want to trade him, and I'm not saying they should. I don't want them to trade him. I like Nembhard. But you mentioned it.
Doesn't Obi Toppin fit in that conversation
Yes.
as well? Making
I mean,
$15 million a year. I mean, you have to match contracts in the NBA. It's not fantasy basketball.
I mean, those two together get you close to $35 million. And if there's a player out there that you think can be a third star next to Halliburton and Siakam, then you probably got to consider it. Now, I'm not saying that I would love that, but I've been saying, and I'm sure I said it on your radio show, that I kept thinking the Spurs would be a team that would have interest in him. And then we get Jake Fisher's report today that said that the Spurs called the Pacers and asked about Nembhard and tried to trade for him. So I'm glad that my radar was on there because I can just Nembhard is a Spurs kind of player to me. So I tweeted
maybe
about
that's I mean that's another reason they got it done.
Well, yes.
Hey, teams are calling. Yeah, there's interest there. Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, go ahead and sign this before you find out there's more than a few teams that might be interested. Yeah.
Well, I think the Spurs would have had money. The Spurs would have had money to do it potentially with the guys they have. They could have made room. I mean, this is a pretty smart team, and getting Nimby and Wemby together would be a pretty good defensive point guard, power forward, center combination. So I did kind of like take it to Twitter, and I was like kind of bragging about how I've been calling this out, but people were getting mad at me.
I saw that.
Even getting upset that I could say that the Spurs would be a team to watch out for. Look, it's just good information to know. Like, it's good to know there are teams that are interested in him. Number one, it tells you how good of a player he is. And number two, if they do have to meet that approach that crossroad at some point, where like we got to move somebody because we don't want to pay the tax or whatever, we don't want to go into the second apron. Is he a guy that could be moved? And is there a team that has interest? Well, there you go. You can go back and make connections that the Spurs were highly interested and tried to get him from Indiana. So I know I threw a lot out at you there, but that's just my overall thoughts on why they brought him back and other teams having interest.
You know what's interesting? While you were talking a few minutes ago, you were talking about you mentioned Bruce Brown being moved in mid-season, and we remember what happened with Buddy Hield and everything. Like at one point, and Tyrese at that point was healthy and playing just basketball that was ridiculous, right? And you mentioned you thought Nembhard coming off the bench and everything was struggling. It wasn't like he was buried, but it feels that way now that he is paid, and it feels like he gets the first shot here to be the clear-cut starter. Mm-hmm. Like, and I wonder, and so acknowledging what has happened and looking forward, we're mentioning all those moves that had to happen to kind of clear this way, right? For a guy to show off and get paid and get rewarded by the Pacers. What do we think is the next part of that? In other words, they have now paid a good amount of guys here, right? They are financially invested in this team. I mean, I think that's the other big takeaway that I have is, hey, we like the guy. We're going to reward him. We are financially invested as an organization here. Is the byproduct of Nembhard's ascension was Buddy had to go and some other guys fell to the wayside. What's kind of the next part of that, I wonder, because not everyone's going to be able to get paid. Now, the years may line up, right? Some young guys in a couple years, then you can make some moves, shorter contracts. But that's also the interesting part is who's the left man out or the man left out, I guess, now that so many guys are financially being rewarded by this team.
Yeah, I think the first person I look at is, okay, Aaron Neesmith signed his deal, but that's really cheap if you think about it. $11
Yeah.
million for the next 3 years. Like, but he's also getting paid like a bench player. So that to me, I think leaves that window of, okay, you did a really good job as a starter, but we want to see Matherin as that starting three with Halliburton and Nembhard. Let's see what that looks like. I don't think it's going to happen
Without a
right
doubt.
away.
Without a doubt. That's what you want to see, right? If you're
Yeah.
a fan, that's what you want to see.
Yeah, and then I think Jarris, I think he proved in summer league how far away he still is from out beating Obi Toppin for the backup power forward spot. But maybe in 2 years, when Toppin's on like got 2 years left, or maybe he's on an expiring, at that point you say, okay, we're going to move off of Obi, and we're going to kind of let Jarris take over as the backup four or whatever. I think that you got to look more at those guys like your Neesmiths and your Toppins as really good role players that fit this team, but are they in the way of the stars that you drafted as lottery picks and Matherin and Walker and taking away some of their spot on this team? Because I think that there's a case if Walker hits everything, right, hits all of his potential, he could be the starting three. And that's where it gets interesting.
I agree with you.
Because he's a
Yeah,
better passer.
I agree.
He's more of a natural passer than Matherin, where Matherin's just like a bucket getter. And Matherin's defense has gotten better, but he's still a work in progress. And I know everybody says he's got a higher ceiling than Nembhard, and that's true. But the fit is the big thing. And I think Chad Buchanan came on our podcast, and he said it multiple times. Like, he's got I think the playoffs kind of showed him this is how you're going to be successful and really work on our system. Now it's up to you to put the work in to do it. So if he can do that, then I think, okay, maybe he does push for a starting spot. But if he doesn't, at that point, do they say, okay, maybe he's a big trade chip that we use?
I guess the other conversation topic that I had on this was, and I think you mentioned part of it there. I'm struck by, how quickly here in the last couple years they've been able to find their guys and sign guys that they're real happy with, like without naming guys in the league. Sometimes you're taking guys that you're like, there's a free agent scurry and this is what we're left with type of deal. Or maybe it's a stretch. Maybe we're having to sell it to teammates or the fan base or the media, whatever it is. And there's just none of that. They like Andrew Nembhard. They wanted Andrew. I mean, Carlile came on with us every Tuesday. He likes Andrew Nembhard. I mean, it doesn't matter what you or I think or anybody else. He finds great value in what he does, as I think we're going to get tired of hearing about defense now from them. I think the rhetoric for them is, we know we're kind of a badass offensive team, okay? Like, we're just worried about, like, I think the conversation's going to be that. And I think a huge part of that's going to be anchored around Andrew Nembhard. And that's why you want him on this team. But I'm struck by, they have guys that they may not be the best team, but they're not going to be done in by, as JMB would say, any jackassery. Yeah. That's not going to be. And the guys that did that, maybe there was a little bit of that even last season, right? There was perhaps some scuffling. That's not the case. They found guys. They have found guys, first round picks, second round picks, trades, cast offs like Obi Toppin. You can mention Aaron Neesmith would be involved. He feels like, he's probably a cast off there in Boston. Second chance guys now in their 30s in Siakam. They found a star that maybe the other team in Sacramento didn't know how much of a star he actually was, in Tyrese Halliburton. And they did and listen, they've taken some gambles and they've found the core guys. And that's what the last year has been, them rewarding the guys that they found.
Well, I'll just say this. I think for the longest time when Paul George left and before they got Tyrese, they were trying to figure out what their identity was, because there was a small stretch there when they were really good with Victor Oladipo in his first year, but so many people did not believe in Nate McMillan as a head coach. So they finally move off of McMillan. They go through the Sabonis Turner era. They bring in Nate Bjorkgren for a year, and they pray to God nobody remembers that they did that because they got rid of him so quick. And then they bring in Rick Carlisle, and Rick Carlisle identified all the problems. They got rid of the players that didn't fit this team and this system. They said, we're going to target Tyrese Halliburton when they knew that he could become available, and they started finding the right pieces to put around him. And I think that's where it's really worked out, because it's like, okay, they go out and get Pascal Siakam. They needed a 4 for the longest time, but it wasn't like, okay, now we're going to change how we play for Pascal. It's no, we play this way with Tyrese. So Pascal, better catch up and learn how to play this way because that's how we're doing it. They did the same thing.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt. If you do, you get rewarded.
Yes.
I mean, that's the other side of this. That is the Matherin, Jarris Walker conversation. Like, guys, you understand this guy fit what we're doing. He got paid. Obi Toppin was a cast-off. Let's say what he was in New York. He was unwanted. They moved on. He was a cast-off. He fits the mold. He gets $15 million per year, right? He gets a chance to start basketball games in the NBA. Andrew Nembhard gets nearly $20 million a year. Tyrese obviously gets the money. He's the leader of everything. I mean, look what has been proven here. I think that's just a huge part of it. That's a huge part of it. He's one of the biggest parts of it, obviously. Yeah, what Carlile is? You ever watch Bar Rescue? You ever watch John Tafford? Oh, you got to watch that. Oh, I'm sure your viewers and listeners, that's what he goes in there and he flips bars, like the Hotel Impossible guy. Remember he flipped a hotel? Yeah. That's basically what Rick Carlile had to do. I mean, he had to pinpoint the issues, and there were more than one.
I mean, anybody that gets mad about Rick Carlisle's rotations, I'm like, you guys wouldn't even be in this spot without Rick Carlile. Imagine maybe Bjorkgren was still here and Kevin Pritchard was like, no, this is my guy. I'm going to write it out now. I mean, Rick Carlile literally has changed the trajectory of the franchise by addressing what they needed. And then obviously getting Halliburton. I mean, it's a 1-2 thing. And then, of course, just adding all the pieces in there with that. But I mean, Carlisle has been pretty adamant, about the draft stuff. I mean, they started, to me, drafting a lot differently when Carlisle took over. I think his voice is louder in that front office in terms of identifying players that he likes. Obi Toppin's a perfect example. They didn't have to give up anything to get him 2 bad second-round picks to the Knicks. The Knicks were done with Obi. They didn't want to pay him. They knew the payday was coming up. And Obi fits perfectly with this team. Yeah. And I think Indiana learned early on, okay, he's not a starter. He's not good enough defensively to be a starter for 82 games and get us to the playoffs. But man, he really embraced that bench role. He never gets hurt. He played every single game last year, and that's a guy you reward for that. And he wants to be here. Like, that's the thing. Finding guys that want to be in Indiana is a big thing, and Nembhard's pretty quiet to himself. I think that he likes this kind of market because there's not too much exposure, but at the same time, they all have that chip on their shoulder. They all want to get better, and I give Carlisle a lot of credit because in Nembhard's rookie year, they viewed him as the third-string point guard behind Halliburton and McConnell, and thought when McConnell's contract maybe runs out or when he starts getting a little bit older, now Nembhard can take over. But Carlisle told the front office, like, I can't keep Nembhard out of the rotation. He's too good. And he made him a starter because that was the best spot for him. And even when he tried changing it, he went back to it because he knows that's what's the best fit. So I think it's a great deal. I think it's honestly, like, Indiana rewarding their own players to me is huge because they said, you know what, we made it to the Eastern Conference Finals and we feel like we're just scratching the surface. And I think with this young core growing together, they might not have had any sexy moves, but sometimes the sexy moves don't result in victories, where teams that stay together and don't look as sexy with their moves can maybe put a bigger dent in what they do in the regular season and in the playoffs.
There's no doubt that they value the full roster and cohesion more so than other teams. Again, that doesn't, there's different ways to do it. It doesn't mean that everyone would think them to be right, but that's the way that it feels with their team. And I think you see it with this team. I listen, I think it's an exciting season. It's a big off season. A lot's banking on, okay, now a lot of these guys have financially been taken care of, or we know they have a specific role. Now it's time to, hey, you just made the Eastern Conference Finals. Let's go. That's the kind of feeling, we're out of Colts camp. That's the feeling that I get with Colts camp. That's the feel I get with the Pacers as well. That, hey, it's go time. This is an off season about getting better. Let's get better. And clean up some of the sloppy losses. You had the bad teams last year. And have a quality roster that continues to get better, and let's go. This is as exciting as an offseason, and obviously in many years, I think, just with what is on the horizon, what kind of team you could see this coming season.
You got real expectations heading into the year when you didn't have that the last 2 years, and that's the only difference I think that's going to be interesting with this team. But I love that Halliburton said, everybody keeps talking about the top 4 in the Eastern Conference, and they're not mentioning the Pacers, and it's just like, what do we have to do? We made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Nobody believes in us still. He said, I guess this is Indiana, and that's how it's going to be. I mean, even Zach Lowe on his podcast was talking about the top 8 in the Eastern Conference, and he was like,
Yeah.
he put Indiana at like 6 or whatever when he was just naming the names.
Yeah.
He said Miami last, and all of a sudden he's like, well, Miami's going to be like, we have Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. What made the Pacers jump us? That's kind of disrespectful. And I'm thinking the Pacers just made the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, why are we crowning Philadelphia, a team that can never stay healthy? Paul George has never been a guy that's ever been able to put a team on his back and say, let's go to the Eastern Conference Finals and win this thing. I mean, since his days here with Indiana. So
sure.
I just think people are kind of overlooking him. And you brought it up, like all the terrible losses they had last year. If they win just like 3 or 4 of those, they're the 2 seed. So it's not like they're that far away to me from being a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference, have home court advantage in the playoffs. And I don't think people really want to play their style because they showed in the playoffs. It doesn't matter how you play. You're not going to take them out of the way that they play their style. It's just a matter of, can they make their shots or not? And that can be where it gets a little challenging. But I think everybody with that experience last year is only going to be hungrier to come back and try to win this year.
Yeah, I have noticed like them being picked about 6th in the East.
Yeah,
I feel like that's where a lot of people have them, and and listen, if I'm the Pacers, that's fine, good, let's go. I mean, let's figure it out. Again, they easily could be in the 50s in wins if they clean up what they had last year against 4 or 5 bad losses against bad teams.
Yeah, a full year of Halliburton healthy, hopefully, that'd be big. Him and Siakam getting more reps together. I mean, with him fully healthy, because we don't really think he was ever fully healthy playing with Siakam. And you mentioned it when he was playing like he was in the first 2 months of the season, like he was out of this world, like incredible. So, if he can get back to that, and maybe this whole Team USA benching thing will be a little bit of fire underneath him as well.
No boy, yeah.
I mean, there's just a lot there that can, motivate these guys, and I think Mathurin's got a lot to prove this year with having the success they had last year without him, and the question marks around him, and him taking things personally with people saying stuff about him. I just think it's a good year for the Pacers. I mean, it's a good offseason, like you said. I think a lot of people should be excited for what's to come. But the Nembhard news, the James Johnson news, bringing it all back to this, is what makes you excited because you're bringing back the core pieces that matter. And even a guy like James Johnson, this is a guy that doesn't play any minutes, but he understands his role.
Literally, he plays no minutes.
Yeah, and he understands his role. Point. And it's better than having a guy on the end of the roster on your team that is going to be upset because they're not playing. You have a legit adult in the room that knows what it takes to win, and he's not going to be all whiny because he's not getting minutes. He's happy in that role, and it makes everybody else have a happy morale. And hopefully it encourages guys like Jarris Walker who are probably chopping at the bit to get playing time. And he can say, look, young buck, you got to earn it. Keep working hard. And if somebody else told him
put his hand over his shoulder, give him the young buck.
That's what he's got to do. He's the dad of the group. He's the cool uncle, right?
Plus he knows. Plus he's a fighter.
Yeah.
Plus everyone's scared to death of him. Yeah. All the mentoring is fine, but I think it's because he's menacing. I think that's the number one and only thing that we need to care about. He got paid $3 million because he's menacing, which is fantastic.
Oh man. So anyway, good stuff. Hopefully you'll fall in love with this deal a little bit more than you did initially. I know you liked it, didn't love it, but Nembhard's a good player, and sure there are probably better fits at the shooting guard for a championship level team. But where you're at right now with the roster currently constructed the way that it is, this is a great deal. It's a good bargain deal. You don't let him go to restricted free agency where he could find a bigger contract.
Plus they love him. Plus Carlile loves him.
He loves him.
He loves him as a player.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Carlile can't get enough of Nembhard. I mean, he likes Ben Shepherd a lot too. I've noticed that.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
You know why? They play good defense.
Yeah.
I got 3 guys that play defense. I'm going to say something about this, So.
I'm going to talk about them in the media whenever I can.
Yeah. So, and I think Nembhard probably doesn't get talked about enough. I know that I don't feel like he always gets included in that Walker Mathurin group either as a potential
without a doubt.
And
yeah, I would totally agree. He doesn't. No,
I feel like he's already proven that he's better than both of them right now. I don't know what his ceiling is, but I really think he could be a starting point guard on a lot of teams. Like I think he's that good.
Yeah. Well, it's you look at the other 2 guys and they have physical attributes. I mean, they're jumping out of the gym. They're doing the things that the fans like to see. I mean, Mathurin has had moments though. I shouldn't make it sound like Mathurin hasn't. He had he had a couple years ago, but even last year, remember, he was the talk of the All-Star weekend. Halliburton obviously was everywhere and was at all the parties and everything. But I mean, you're talking about on the floor, Benedict Mathurin, people like, oh yeah, he's still there, like sort of thing. Like I thought nationally he got a lot of attention that week, probably second most to Tyrese, I would imagine.
I mean, he won the Rising Stars MVP. He was talking trash on the mic to Jaden Ivey.
Jaden Ivey, yeah.
And you could feel the person, like how personal it was, because Jaden Ivey's from Purdue. The Pacers fans all wanted Jaden Ivey. He goes the pick before Mathurin. The Pistons were really keyed on Mathurin as a possibility. They picked Ivey over Mathurin. And Mathurin, he takes things personally. He keeps note of things. And
oh, yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, so I love that about him. I think that's one thing I miss. Like, I would have loved to have seen him in the playoffs to see what he could have done in that moment, because I've seen where there's been a lot of big games and he steps up to the challenge. He likes those moments. But, yeah, I wonder how much sitting out and watching it did play a factor into how he may approach it moving forward.
I hope so. I mean, they called him out at the end of the year. They said, hey, we need to get going. I mean, I say called him out. There was the onus that was put on him by Carlile and company that, hey, this is an offseason. You saw us ball out without you. Let's ball out with you being a huge part of this rotation.
Yeah, and he's going to have to earn it. They're not just going to give it to him. I think they tried to give it to him last year, and he lost that starting spot pretty quickly to Aaron Nesmith. So we'll see what happens. But, Andy, I do appreciate your time so much. I know you got to get up early for the radio show. So anything you want to plug before I let you go?
We'll be out there, Colts camp on and off. We spoke with Michael Pittman Jr. today. We had Latu on. We're hoping to run down A.D. Mitchell at some point. Chris Ballard spoke with the media yesterday. So me and KB, 7 to 10, 93.5, 107.5. The Fan will be out there again Thursday morning, hanging out until 10 o'clock, and hopefully talking to some players as well.
Are fans allowed out there yet or no?
Yeah, starting tomorrow. Yeah, now some days you have to claim your ticket, and many days are free. There are some that are $5 a donation to a local YMCA effort that the Colts is doing. That's still relatively cheap, obviously, but fans. I expect to see some fans out there. Tomorrow, bright and early. I think practice is 10 to 11 or 10 to 11:15 tomorrow. So come on out there, give them the $5 to park and watch the guys go at it. Be the first time.
Yeah, maybe you guys can meet Andy Sweeney, take a picture with him. That'd be cool too.
Yeah, there we go. We'll be there. We'll be in the corner with the media gas bags. You'll see us push in the corner with the other media gas bags.
I mean, there's a lot more Colts media than there is Pacers, but
oh yeah,
a lot of excitement around both teams. But thanks again, Andy, for coming on. And all right, Pacer fans, Facci will be back tomorrow. He's going to have Keith Smith on talking about the NBA in general, but probably about these deals as well. He does a great job for Spot Track, and they do a great job breaking down all the contract stuff. So if you're interested in knowing what those numbers are for the Pacers and all that stuff, make sure you guys tune in tomorrow. But with that being said, we hope you all have a great day, and we'll talk to you later. Let's go Pacers.